I have a confession to make. I want to start off just by confessing some things to you. Confession is good to the soul. Right? I like action movies. Anybody here like action movies?
Yeah.
You like it?
Yes.
Well, I like action movies, and there's something about when like individuals take on evil and it's overcoming all these odds and they take them out and it's all these explosions or there's fighting and it makes me go like that on the inside. Well, I remember one action movie, and I know you're probably gonna laugh because you're a movie guru, but from when I was younger, now notice I said younger, I was about 10. But Rocky IV.
Oh,
y'all remember that one?
Yeah.
I still like the soundtrack. Eye of the Tiger, Coming to America. I still like that. Look, he's like, do you remember Rocky IV at all? Yeah.
I remember Rocky III.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
which is kind of interesting because Rocky's brother was the one who actually went to acting school.
but see, I like those kind of movies. They like really get me fired up on the inside, and I don't know why. It's kind of goofy, but I love the fact of this guy, going against all odds, that there's no way he should ever win, but he's able to put his shoulder to the plow and just keep working out and then overcome something that's a perceived evil. I love that. I wonder if God created in men that desire. Because when I asked, do you like action movies, most of the ones that said yes in here were
the female.
Well, there's some of you. There are some.
Yes, there are some.
God has created in man a desire, for lack of a better word, to conquer, to be the best, to adventure, for strength and fortitude. I wonder if this has the fact that men, back at creation, the Bible says that we were created outside the garden.
Right.
Look at Genesis 2, 7 and 8, verse 15. Then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put man he had formed. Or verse 15, the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden and take care of it. Notice that, man, we were created in the wilderness. We were created for that sense of adventure, that sense of conquering, that mentality.
All right, amen.
Yeah. That's exactly right. This can-do, ferocious attitude can help men and women, but I'm speaking mainly to men today because this is supposed to be Father's Day. That ferocious attitude that he's placed inside of us is God-given.
Right.
He's put this desire for us to conquer. Men, we can never become stagnant in the point that we lose the desire to become the best that we can be and to do what we can for the Lord. He's placed that within inside us. It's not something we should fear. It's something that we should use to propel us to do more for God. Now, it's true that this ferocious attitude can have its weaknesses. It's true that it's been seen throughout the years that men have abused and overused this God-given desire inside them. Think for a second, things like abuse, murder, rape, brutality. Those are all examples of where men had used their strength that God gave them for improper gains. It's basically using things that God has placed out there to try to build up their own kingdoms. Some of you may have been treated by men in your past in a wrong way. Some of you may have been abused by men in your past. It could have been a father. It could have been somebody at a church. It could have been a pastor. It could have been your neighbor down the street. It could have been anybody. But there may be some of you that have been abused by men. They may have told you things like, you're not worth anything. You're never going to amount to something. They could have used their words to tear you down. They may have used brute strength to overpower you, to cause you to do things you never wanted to do. They may have treated you like garbage and trash and just used you for their own fleshly pleasure. I wanted to tell you first and foremost that you can bring that hurt to God. He never intended it for it to happen. He never wanted it to happen.
That's right.
That was not a God thing doing that to you. That was a man who was far from God who treated you that way. You see, God gave us this strength, this ferociousness, guys, not to overpower somebody else or to control someone else, but He gave us this so that we could protect other people. He gave us this so that we could guard those that He entrusted us with. Man, it's our job and our duty to protect and preserve those God has placed within our midst. Yeah. Our strength should be a blessing to those around us and not a curse. Our strength and our fortitude should be enabling other people to succeed and not tearing them down so that we can't. We men must stand up and do the things that God called us to and pour our lives out for those around us, because that's what Jesus did, and He was the greatest man of all. He gave Himself for others to succeed. He gave Himself so that we could have a relationship with His Father. And men, I want to encourage, I want to challenge you, I want to push you along so that we can become the men of God God has called us to, so that those around us can become the kids, the women, and the other men that God's called them to. Right. Guys, it's up to us to step up to the plate, to be all that we can be for God, and to help others succeed. Yeah. You see, when our strength, when our attitudes are placed in the hands of God, not only are people changed around us, but we actually have the capacity to change nations. Right. I would like for us to look at a familiar story with a new set of lens. It's the story of two men. The first man we all know is Goliath. He was a man who intimidated, a man who was a warrior, but used his warrior strength for his own personal gain. He was a Philistine champion. The other man who we're really going to focus on today is the man David, a young man who you're going to see through these scriptures was humble, who was committed to use all of his God-given abilities to fulfill his God-given call on him and his nation. Amen. This event is told in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17. So let me set a little backdrop of the whole story. Okay? Saul had been made the first king of Israel. And his kingship began well. It started off pretty good. But as he continued in his kingship, you're going to see he became more focused on what the nation thought about him and how the nation could serve him rather than how he could serve the nation. Right. So he ends up almost putting God on the back burner and makes himself basically his own God. And as you can imagine, God pretty much said, okay, Saul, I'm done with it. I'm going to raise up another man who's going to be the leader of this nation, whose heart is on me. As Saul continued in making his own kingdom something great, the Philistine, which was a neighboring, several tribes, who were neighbors, became their enemies. And they started attacking the country of Israel. Boom, they'd attack here. Boom, they'd attack there. Boom, they'd attack there. something had to be done to try to rid the nation of Israel from all these extra attacks. So God sent the prophet Samuel to a family in Bethlehem to anoint a new king. Jesse was the man he sent them to, and Jesse had 8 sons. So Samuel shows up, Jesse has his feast, and says, all right, I want you to bring all your sons, because God told me one of your sons is going to be the new king of Israel. So he starts off with the oldest, and of course, he's all high and mighty. He says he's a good-looking fella, big, amazing guy. The one you would pick if you wanted to. First guy that was always picked for the basketball team. That kind of guy, kind of like Caleb. Just amazing. And God said, nope, not this one. Next one comes. Nope, not this one. Third one comes. Nope, not this one. Goes all the way through 7 sons. And Samuel's like, Jesse, God told me one of your sons is supposed to be king.
That's it.
Where's the other one? There has to be somebody else because none of these guys are this. And Jesse's like, you know what? I do have this one kid. He's out in the pasture. He's taking care of the sheep. Surely that dude's not it. Bring him. We're not going to have any type of feast. Notice he was at a feast and didn't even invite his own kid. But bring him. We're not going to eat until you bring this kid in. They bring him. God tells Samuel, that's him. Anoint that kid right there. So he anoints him. Well, after he's anointed king, it signified to all those present that this kid is going to rule the nation. Well, as many as you know, the story of what happens. The next chapter starts with 1 Samuel 17. There's a huge battle that's embroidering in this valley. The oldest kids have already went off to war with Saul. Imagine the valley's right here. On one mountain is the Israelite army. On the other is the Philistines. And for 40 days, it says the Philistines sent out Goliath to intimidate Israel. So this huge guy, most scholars believe, is close to 8.5 to 9 feet tall, walks out and just defies God the entire time. And these other guys are going, we're dead. They're terrified.
It's over.
They are terrified. That's a little bit of the background. So, as we go through these scriptures, I'm going to give you 6 lessons that we can learn from this valley. 6 lessons we can learn from this valley. So first of all, the first lesson we're going to learn and we're going to look at is true greatness is embodied in servanthood. True greatness is embodied in servanthood. This can be found in 1 Samuel chapter 17 through 20. Let's read that for a second. Now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the Valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. Now, this is the verse I want you to look at. Verse 20. Everybody read that for a second. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. I think it's so cool. If you look at David in this situation. David had been what? Anointed king. How many times when we have been given a position, so to speak, that we know God's called our lives, we tend to stop serving. After David was king, notice, first of all, he was still taking care of sheep. Did anything change in his life? No. He was still doing exactly what his dad asked. He stayed in the pasture with the sheep, even though God had already said, one day you're going to be a king. Second, When his dad came to him there and said, I want you to take this stuff to your brothers, David did not have the audacity to say, but Dad, do you know who I am? One day I'm going to rule you.
No.
God's already called me king here. Why don't you get one of our servants to take this stuff to my brothers? He didn't. True greatness is in servanthood. He did exactly what his dad asked, even though the task was menial.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially with people who are wanting to be in the ministry, they tend to think that the menial things don't matter.
Oh,
But ministry is in the details.
yes, amen.
It's the little things that make a big difference. True greatness is embodied in servanthood. Jesus said in Matthew 23:11, the greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves, get this, will be humbled.
Right.
And those who humble themselves will be exhausted. Exalted. Exalted, that's what I am right now.
Exhaustedly.
Yeah, there you go. But true greatness is in servanthood. If you really want to do great things one day, learn how to serve. And that doesn't mean just going through the acts of service. It's learning how to have a heart of service. We can do certain actions, but if our hearts and the motives behind it are wrong, then it's really not servanthood. A true servant acts to benefit someone else. So once again, true greatness is embodied in servanthood. Number two, another lesson we learned from David here in this valley is going to be don't get your enemies confused. Don't get your enemies confused. Now let me explain to you what I'm trying to say here. Verse 21 through 31. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men. Oh, this starts with 28. What happens? I'm sorry, I can tell I'm kind of sleepy. What happens is David shows up. He hears Goliath taunting, and David's like, hold on a second. Why are we allowing this giant to speak against God? What's going to be done for the man who goes down and fights Goliath?
Right.
So now Eliab, who is David's oldest brother, comes in and reports this. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You come down only to watch the battle. Do you hear the attitude behind Eliab there?
Yep.
David comes down to bring food and cheese, and Eliab attacks him. Eliab had been passed up for the kingship. So I believe that he's jealous here. He is mad at David because David is going to have what he wants. And so he attacks David. He comes after David's character.
Right.
Here's David's response. Now, what have I done? Said David. Can I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. You see, David didn't get his enemies confused.
Right.
He had the opportunity to get bitter of his brothers and their response. He could have taken what Eliab said to heart and went ahead and started attacking Eliab instead of worrying about Goliath. God was setting David up to take down a giant, and the enemy put somebody else in his path that could have gotten his eyes off of what the original goal was supposed to be. We can't allow bitterness to hold us back from becoming what God called us to. David kept his eyes on defeating the true enemy. We must not get our eyes on people as the enemy, but remember that our enemy is the enemy of our souls, who only comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Amen.
People are not our enemy.
Amen.
Let me say that again. People are not our enemy. They may treat us poorly. They may make us angry. They may treat us like we were trash. But people are not our enemy. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood,
That's right.
but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places."
Yeah.
That's our enemy.
That's right.
We are called not to fight against other people, but to love other people.
Mhm.
Third lesson. We are to train in the secret so we can succeed in the public. Train in the secret so that you can succeed in the public. Verses 32 through 37. Starting at verse 33. Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man. He's been a warrior from his youth." Notice that anytime you're going to do something great from God, there's always going to be people who talk back to you and say you can't do it. Always, always, always. There's going to be people. But look what he says. Here's David. But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep." Does that sound like a warrior there? Hold on a second. "When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned to me, I seized it by its hair, struck and killed it." I love this. "Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine."
Man.
Yeah.
There is so much I could talk about right here. I could go on probably for a couple of weeks on this stuff. But I want to pull out some real big highlights on just these few verses. Okay? First of all, look at this. He went after struck the sheep. He cared for the place that God put him.
Yeah.
Right.
David started off as a shepherd. Okay? He started off as a shepherd, and he was willing to die for those sheep.
Yes.
He was willing to take on a lion and a bear to protect his dad's assets.
Yes.
Exactly.
He showed how he was faithful in the little. The Bible tells us that if you're faithful with the little, you'll be faithful over much. If you are not faithful with the little, you won't be faithful over much. He showed God, I can be faithful even with these sheep.
Man.
What does that mean? Where has God placed you? Where has God put you? Are you being faithful in that area that God has placed you? Or are you wasting your time and spinning your wheels? Are you being the dad that you're supposed to be? God's placed you in that position for a reason. Are you being the husband or the wife that God's called you to be? He's placed you in there for a reason. Are you being a faithful employee on your job? Are you kind of just milking the clock a little bit? Are you being faithful? If you truly want to be promoted, be faithful with where God placed you.
Man.
Because when you are faithful over a little, God will put you a ruler over much. Because you have shown your faithfulness. Second of all, notice that not only was he willing to die for the sheep, for the ones that God placed under. I love this part. Because I have been faithful there and God has shown his strength in me through these situations, I know that God is going to help me on this next journey.
Man.
A bear and a lion, that would be ferocious. Could you imagine standing at a lion? Think of how huge those things are. I don't know if I could do it.
Right.
But yet he was willing to go to battle for them. And God showed his greatness through him by destroying the lion and the bear. And he's going, guess what? I trained in secret. Nobody saw me go against that lion and bear.
Right.
Nobody saw me having to face death in my face. Nobody saw it. But because I know God delivered me when nobody was watching, out here in front of these masses, I can watch God still move. Guys, we've got to train in the secret. Then I love this part. He knew that he was going to be victorious. Why? 2 reasons. First reason, probably the most, he had a relationship with God.
Yes.
How do you know that that's such a big deal? Look at his phrase.
Right.
the
Yes.
uncircumcised Philistine. Circumcision was a sign of covenant with God. And he said, I know I will defeat him because I am in covenant with God. He's not.
Right.
He's defying God. I'm his servant.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much there. David knew because God had shown his faithfulness in the secret places.
Yes.
In public, he was going to succeed. How does that translate to us? Every single one of us in here have a relationship with God. We're like David. Our hearts have been circumcised, is what Paul says. So how do we train in the secret? I'll show you.
That's right.
Man, yeah. Yes, amen.
This is how we train in the secret. Our position, you don't have to technically be on your knees. But if you're not spending time in prayer and in submission before God, don't expect great miracles to happen in your
Amen.
life.
Amen.
Don't expect to see God move.
Right.
We must train in the secret. Just like roots on a tree cannot be seen but provide structure for that tree in the hard times,
Right.
your prayer life provides strength when nobody's seeing,
Yeah.
when your life is being rocked by the storms that everybody does. Your time with God is vital. If you're not spending time with God, your life is not going to be strong. Like we talked about a while ago, 5 by 5 by 5. Spend 5 minutes reading the Bible, praying for 5 minutes, at least 5 days a week. Your secret life is important. Let's look at another one. Number 4, be who God created you to be. Another little lesson we learned from this valley. This is found in verses 38 through 39. Then Saul dressed up David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Saul was just trying to watch out for David.
Yeah.
He was trying to give him something to be successful in his journey. Saul wants David to win. Because if David loses, Israel is going to be the Philistine captives. So he's just trying to help him out. Hey, David, this has helped me out in the past. Wear this helmet. Hey, David, this has helped me out. Here's my breastplate. Take my sword, David. You just go right ahead. And David's going, hold on a second. I can't do this. When I fought that lion and the bear, I didn't have these tools. Thank you for helping me, but God has designed me this way. This is what I've been trained in. Because see, he had that slingshot. That was a weapon of choice for his tribe. He had been trained in that slingshot. There were stories where they could actually knock off like things off a wall from a far distance with those rocks. So it's not like he had never been trained with the weapon, but he's like, I can't use that weapon of the sword because this is the sword I've walked with my entire life that I've seen God take me from place to place to place with. Many times, we try to change who we are to the latest fad or teaching.
Come on.
We must be faithful to who God taught us to be.
Yes, amen.
We must be faithful with who God taught us to be. We can definitely look up to people. We can definitely go, I like the way that guy, I don't know, operates. But you can't act like somebody else. Be who God created you to be.
Amen.
We went through that entire series about we were gifted for service, and each one of us, God has placed gifts within because there's certain areas of the body we need to serve in. That's what I'm talking about. Don't try to be the next great so-and-so. Find out what God created you to do and then go shine your light for him. Let the giftings he's placed within you rise up and shine. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't ever try to be somebody else. He created you that way for a reason. So David learned, okay, I can't do this. He took it off and said, I'm going to be who God made me be. From Bethlehem. We're skilled slingshot people. That's what I'm going to do. Next. Rest in who God is before you run at your giant. Rest in who God is before you run at your giant. You see, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is found verses 40 through 51, but we're only going to look at verse 45 through 48. David said to the Philistines, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied.
Amen.
This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and to the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in
Yes.
all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. As the Philistine moved closer to attack me, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Notice the sequence. I come against you in the name of the Lord. Then he ran.
Yes.
We must rest in who God is before we run at our giant.
Amen.
David was certain that God would deliver him because of his relationship with him. He rested in that promise. He rested in that promise. A lot of times we try to live this overcoming life without really having a relationship with God. We have to have a relationship with God in order to run our giants. We need to trust that in our relationship that it's strong enough when conflicts and battle arise. And finally, the last lesson we're going to go over quickly today. I could have done a whole series of this, could you tell?
Yes.
I may one day come back and really unpack every lesson. Your victories are to impact others. This is found in verses 52 and 53. David ran and stood over. This is after he's already knocked him out with the little rock. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. David won the victory, and look what happens. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead was strewn along the Sarum road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. The men of Israel were encouraged because of the victory of David.
Yes.
David won the battle, but the men received strength.
Yes.
Your victories were never meant to just benefit you.
Right.
Let me say that one more time. Your victory was never meant to just benefit you. Your victories are supposed to give others encouragement that God is faithful and that God can meet them where they're at because he met you where you were. We can never look at our lives and the victories that we have in them as just about us.
Right.
God wants other people to receive strength and encouragement by moving in our lives.
Man.
Your testimony matters. What has God done in your life? What can you share that other people will receive encouragement from? See, I believe that there are some people here today who will fit in three categories. There are those who will look out only for number one. They're only worried about getting ahead, the next place, trying to find the next rung of the ladder. This could be financially, vocationally, relationally, maybe even ministerially. God is saying you won't get ahead until you settle it in your heart that you are going to serve for the sole purpose of improving other people's lives. I believe that there's those that are here that may have been hurt. Maybe you've experienced abuse or hurt from others. This could be verbally, physically, emotionally, maybe even sexually. True, you were mistreated. But God is saying that if you forgive them, you'll move on. But until you forgive, you're going to be stuck back in those time periods. Not because He wants you there, but because you're keeping yourself there by hanging on to that. And you have to let them go. And that God will deal with them. You have to forgive. Allow yourself to be set free and not be held back by the chains of bitterness. I also believe that there are those who think that they will magically get ahead in life. You go to church, but God is only a one-day thing or a thing to check off your to-do list. To you, this is just a religion where you follow the right rules and not the relationship where you can experience life-giving love from God. God says you won't get ahead in your life until you learn to lean into Him in that secret place. Doing so will provide you strength and peace that you need to succeed. Then there are those who also need to know that you are created for a divine purpose with specific talents and gifts. You do not need to be like somebody else or act like someone else in order for God to love you or for you to fulfill the call of God on your life. He says to you, you will not get ahead until you learn to rest in His love before you try to go out and conquer giants. And then finally, there are those you are supposed to already be mentoring others. God has already brought you through so much. He's done great things with you. And you wonder if your time is basically over. You wonder if you missed the chance for God to really use you. God is not done with you. It is time for you to start living and giving your life to others. I have a feeling that there are several here and maybe even online, but you found yourself, you feel like you're in one of those categories. When I read it, something inside you jumped. We're going to take a moment and we're going to pray. And we're going to ask God to deal with our hearts. There's several areas there that I feel like God is really dealing with. And the hard part is, and almost all of them, is an act of surrendering our will and saying, God, not mine, but your will be done in my life. All the way from being treated one way, you learn to let go of that, to learning to let go of, but God, if I mentor people, my time will be taken up. It's all about surrendering to Him. So let's bow our heads and we're just going to ask God to help us here. Father, you desire relationship more than anything else. I ask you, Father, in all these categories, wherever they found themselves, I ask that you would help us to surrender and remember, Lord, that you are the one who brings us victory. But then you also ask us, Lord, to surrender our lives to you and give our lives for others. I pray that you'd speak to each and every single one of us here. Show us areas where we still need to surrender so that we can truly be successful. Help us to be servants. Help us to remember who the real enemy is. I pray, Father, that you'd help us, Lord, to live our lives for others. Help us to be who you created us to be. Help us to rest in your love before we run after our giants. And help us, Lord, to live our life and its victories as a sign for others that you are faithful. In Jesus' name, everybody said?
Amen.
Amen.
Amen.